You know, I hope everyone's enjoying the festival. There's a lot of great bands out there. Tonight there's a lot more great bands out there. Unfortunately, I can't be here for it. But we're here with Andy McMahon, who's going to tell us a lot of things about the business side of it, because I know there's a lot of artists here, and also the fan side of it, because I know there's a lot of fans here. So I'm going to get right into it, since we're running a little late. So basically, Andrew, you have a new album coming out, EP coming out April 30th, and you're independent now.
That's correct.
And so things are totally different. I worked at Atlantic Records 15 years, and we gave artists the funding, the staff, we had connections with radio and retail. Now you're on your own. I imagine you need a team. You need something to put that out there to get to the fans, to get to new listeners. So what's it like being independent?
Interestingly, it's pretty similar. I've been on sort of major labels for the most part for my whole career. I mean, since back when I was, starting with something corporate, we signed to Drive Through, but it was very quickly we were attached to MCA. And what you tend to find is that the people who work for you are the ones who work the hardest. So usually it's your manager. If you have your own publicist, your publicist is going to work for you. When you have label publicists, when you have a lot of label staff, I mean, they can be great, but they're also working tons of other artists. So it kind of got to the point for me where I was, I'd been on a major for so long. I left Universal when I was with something corporate to go to Maverick. And Maverick was a 13-person staff at that point. It was a dream come true. It was like they had major label funding, but it was basically an independent label in a lot of senses.
It was like family.
Yeah, exactly. And so I put out the first Jack's record that way. That's why I ended up there. And then it got sold back to Warner Brothers after the first record was done. So it had sort of, since that point, I've been eager to kind of get off, and not as any slight to the people who were working there, but just I hate big machines, And so now, I just kind of brought everything in house. I mean, the risk for me is that I take on the financial risk of it, which certainly we have. But I've got a lot of amazing fans who have who stood by me, and so I'm kind of taking the gamble that they'll get me through it.
Yeah, definitely. Talk about fans and how you have hardcore fans. I've seen you at South by Southwest twice, I guess a couple of years ago, and then this year. I saw you Saturday night in New York, Long Island. My daughter's a huge fan. So basically, what is it that you do that is, other than great songs, I mean, yeah, you have to have great songs, but what is it that you do that's a special sauce, like, to get your fans so engaged?
I mean, it's interesting. I think it starts with the songs. I think, for me, the kind of music I was always really drawn to was sort of more introspective, singer-songwriter-based songs. Even if they were, a band, it was stuff that you could sort of set to the, as like the soundtrack to your life kind of vibe. And I think for me, that's what I always loved about music. So that's always what I try and put into my music. And so I think that's where it started. I try to tell a lot about who I am in the song, and I think the more you sort of reveal about yourself to people, the easier it is for them to connect and for it to touch a part of them as well. So I think that's first and foremost. Secondly, I grew up as a huge fan. I was the first guy waiting in line when I was in high school going to see shows. Still now, when I go see a show, I try and get as close as I possibly can. I was at Coachella last year, and I was literally just muscling through every crowd to get to the front. So I think I have a lot of, I relate to that. I relate to the idea of being really passionate about the art, whether it's music or whatever art it is that you're following. And so I try to be really respectful of that, and I do my very best to spend time with the fans every day when I'm at a show, and to make it known that, like, that this is how I eat, this is how I live, is because of this connection.
Exactly. I always tell the bands, your fans, obviously, it's obvious, but they're your biggest asset. You got to treat them like you want to be treated, and listen to them, and all that.
Yeah, and I know it's like that works for me. I know everybody has different approaches, but I believe very much in stripping down the barriers of sort of the glamour, the celebrity side of what art is, because I think we are really just at the core result people.
Yeah, we will assume. Just going back to the music business side. Now that you're on the business side of your own project, because every band is really you're a company as a band, and you're like the CEO. So how does that affect your creative side, being the boss of financial risk, everything?
Truthfully, it kind of drives me. I mean, I know that everybody has sort of different opinions on this, but when you know that you're putting yourself on the line, you're putting your financial well-being on the line, when you take that kind of a risk, it really forces you to be accountable to what you create. You know, when you really believe in something, you're willing to spend on it. And I think, you know, for me, it puts me in a position to say every day, like, okay, like, I'm gonna have to wake up and drop a whole lot of dough to get this out there. Do I believe in it? And so yeah, it does motivate me, I think.
Another question here is on the marketing side. Like, how has digital and social media played a role in everything you're doing now? Because now it's, you know, you might not have that giant staff of people doing things for you, but now you can interact on your own.
Well, I think it's stripped away a lot of the barriers for bands in general. I mean, if you look at, I mean, I consider, like, when I started in 2001, where, you know, when I was like one of the first band websites. I feel like when I was like, you know, 1998, something corporate was put up our website. We had message boards, and that was pretty cutting edge at the moment, you know, and sort of seeing how the traditional gatekeepers that have been in place to sort of make sure that the only music that got through was the stuff that was the big companies' music, you know, and the kind of music that was coming out when I started with something corporate, it was like, you know, I won't name names, but it was a lot of crap. I mean, you know, there was a lot of really bad music on the radio at that point. And
it still is.
Yeah, well, and there's always going to be, you know what I mean? But I feel like that juggernaut has loosened up so much as a result of digital media, because people have access. You know, you don't have to be, you don't have to get on a label to get heard. You don't have to be, you know, you don't have to be managed by some huge company. You just have to have a good song and the ingenuity to work the tools that you're given. And so for me, I mean, I ran away from that stuff for years, but like pretty much in the last year, I finally started using Twitter, and you know, it was Instagram that really got me into social media in general. I'd always been very fearful of it, but no, I mean, it's amazing, and it does, it connects you to the people who listen.
Yeah. All right, back to the music. Throughout your career, you've balanced pop rock songs with classic attitude of the piano. And you know, I think you're like a modern day, like Elton John, Billy Joel type. I'm the only person though in Long Island who does not like Billy Joel. I love his early stuff.
I won't go there.
Love his early
because I'm
stuff.
a fan.
But you know, to me, you're like the way Elton John's early stuff and Billy Joel's early stuff. You're like the modern day, that type of stuff.
That's a huge compliment. I appreciate it.
No problem. Yeah. So which album of yours, you know, do you think is the best representation of you know, that's out there, that's not yours, that, you know, helped you throughout your career?
Well, I mean, you say Billy Joel. I mean, for me, as far as albums that kind of got me into music, I mean, it was like that double disc of Billy Joel's Greatest Hits was pretty huge for me. You know, I started playing piano when I was 9, and you know, that was the year that Nirvana broke. And so, needless to say, like, and I didn't, you know, as a 9-year-old, I couldn't really relate to that. It didn't, you know, it didn't make sense to me. And I was a kid playing the piano, and there weren't a lot of piano players to look to. They just weren't, you know. I mean, there was Bruce Hornsby, was having hits around them, but you know, for me, I got the Billy Joel Greatest Hits and the Elton John Greatest Hits, and I ended up sort of gravitating towards Billy Joel. He was the first concert I ever saw. And that music, I think, really sustained me for a while until I got a little bit older and started finding bands on my own and really kind of digging into, you know, stuff that was away from the piano as well. But Billy was big for me.
I think Ben Folds probably a little more recent.
Huge, yeah. That was when I was in high school. But you know, Ben Folds 5 came out, and you know, that was like an epiphany for me, because it was like, wow, finally, like somebody playing rock and roll behind a piano. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
All
right, so in 2005, you were diagnosed with leukemia, and it transformed a negative experience into artistic inspiration. Can you explain how all that happened?
Well, I mean, you know, bluntly, I was on tour getting ready to release the first Jax record, and found out I was sick. You know, I suppose, yeah, it turned it into a positive. I mean, for me, music has always been the way I've coped with things. It's always been the way that I've, you know, answered sort of the questions of the day. So when I got sick, it was pretty natural for me to sort of find solace in the music. But truthfully, it was harder, I think, to relate that story in pop music, because it's not, when the first Jack's record was like about breaking up, and that's a easier subject matter to sort of tackle in a 3.5-minute pop song than cancer, I suppose. But I tried, but it was hard. It was a tricky time. But there are a lot of people who've found me through sort of sharing that similar life experience, and there are a lot of songs that I leaned on to sort of get me through it, and in turn I found that other people have as well. And in which case, I'm pretty honored that that happens to be so.
Absolutely. Yeah, at Reverb Nation, my company, we launched a charity program called Music for Good, so it's a little plug.
Yeah.
And the way it works is musicians sell their music, the charity gets 50%, and the artist gets 50%, so everybody wins. So it's just an idea. We've been working with like Sweet Relief, Fender Music Foundation, Zach Brown's Camp Southern Ground, but you also set up your own.
Yep.
And it's, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so when I was still in the hospital, in I guess it was 05, we basically, when we posted that I wasn't well and what was going on, we knew people would send gifts and they'd send flowers and very clearly, like I couldn't even receive flowers because I was so sick that the pollen, could have done me in. So we sent little flowers, send donations to, it was at that point the Pediatric Cancer Research Foundation, and people went crazy. People raised tons and tons of money. And it occurred to us sort of in the process of going through it that if we could create sort of one place that everybody knew they could donate, and the money would go to a good spot, that we could be good stewards of that money for them. So I started the Dear Jack Foundation, and since then, we've raised, gosh, for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, we've raised almost $500,000 individually on our own. We're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that we've raised, and we've sort of shifted our focus to young adult cancer now, because there's in 30 years, people ages 15 to 39 haven't seen an improvement in their survival ratings. Right. If you're suffering from cancer, and it's pretty much everybody sitting in this room right now, they're in a worse spot than the younger or the older people who are diagnosed. So we're trying to do our best to turn the tide on that.
I know musicians and charity is just, it goes hand in hand almost. I mean, musicians are always so focused on helping out, and fans react to it as well. So I think another thing where everybody wins.
Well, yeah, and if you can get, if you have the ability to galvanize a group of people, or even a small portion of your audience to do something and help, I think it's a pretty noble thing to do.
Right, exactly. So back to the business side. Any advice you have for young musicians working on their project and showcasing the music industry?
Well, I think the more of it that you can do yourself, the better the ticket you can write for yourself. I look at an artist like Mark Foster from Foster the People, and that song "Pump Up Kicks" was a tune that was a demo.
Yeah.
And that guy got where he got, I think, because he had a great song. And I think the more that you invest in your music up front, and the less that you put your emphasis on getting signed, or I think the better off you're going to be, because then you're going to get a better deal, one, if you do go that route, but two, you might be surprised, because I think a lot of the artists that we're finding these days that are really actually getting picked up, frankly, are building something so substantial on their own that a lot of these labels are like trying to snatch them up before they get too big. And there's a lot of power. There's a lot of power in an artist who's able to work the online space effectively, and who's able to write and record their own music and get out there and perform. That I think taking the power into your own hands is the best way to get what you need out of this business.
Yeah, I agree. There's plenty of things out there to help out. I always tell bands that you can't be a 10 anymore. You got to be an 11. You got to have obviously great songs, because it's all about the songs. And even your performances, there's a lot of great bands and great songs, great singers, whatever, but they're just like standing there singing. It's like, you got to do more. You got to just get involved with the artist and with the fans, and know, it's not that easy anymore because fans have a million things of other forms of entertainment.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of competition.
Well, it's about connecting. I mean, I think at the core of it, I mean, you know, not just music, but any art form is really about what you give of yourself and if people can grasp onto something from it. So I think it's really about finding that sort of truth and being able to relate it to people. And you know, you get on a stage, you know if you're connecting to people. And if you're not, you know, go back to the garage and work harder.
Right, exactly. Any advice for students of the business that are hoping to become managers or producers or, you know, deal with touring as a career?
I mean, you know, get your hands dirty. I think, you know, most of the guys that I know that work in this business and are successful in this business are guys who didn't sort of try and follow just a traditional path. You know, I know a lot of people who go to school and they go to school for music business studies and things like that. And not to say that there aren't a lot of successes that come out of those places, but the music business changes on a dime. That if you can write a curriculum for a year, then you're already behind by the time you get halfway through it. You know, the guys I know that are most successful are the ones who made, you know, like on the business side, made friends with bands early, started working in nightclubs, started working where music was, and hustle. You know, I've got a guy in my camp who now works in the agency, and he was in the van with me, started as a guitar tech. You know what I mean? And I think that there's a lot to be said about if you're not a musician yourself, but you really want to be on the business side, surround yourself with musicians, see tons of shows, be opinionated, know what you like, and gravitate towards that. Because the other part of this business that you tend to find is the people who are most successful love what they do.
Yep.
They're willing to eat, sleep, breathe it all day. It's not 9 to 5. It's, you know, it's an amazing job, but it's a 24-hour gig, and you got to be on your phone. You got to be ready. So, you know, just be there, be at the center of the scene if you can.
We don't have any more questions left, so it's probably time for the audience to ask some questions. There's got to be a lot of artists out there and a lot of fans. Nobody has questions.
There we go.
What was your major breaking point? Like, at what point were you like, I've made it?
It's so funny because I don't even think I've ever said it. You know what I mean? I mean, I think there've been moments where it's like, yes, this is the dream. This is what I've always wanted. But I think because I never really attached a lot of expectation to what I would get out of this business, I didn't really like have one of those like epiphanies per se. Certainly, like one big moment though that I do remember and recognize is like this kind of, you know, one of those almost famous kind of like, or that thing you do running down the street like with your hair on fire kind of vibe, was you know, I was, gosh, maybe 18, maybe 19 years old, and my first band, Something Corporate, we had recorded an EP, which was really just meant to be like floated out there, see what happens. But we would go make a full length, but it would be the thing that kept us on the road. And through sort of this hysterical miracle, our local radio station, K-Rock in Los Angeles, picked up, you know, the goofiest song on the whole record and ended up playing it like a lot. And I remember, you know, one night leaving rehearsal, making the full-length record, and turning on my car and hearing the song on the radio on the station that I had grown up listening to. And I, like, you know, ran into the rehearsal space. It's like, holy shit, we're on the radio. You know, like I have like a beater, like, you know, Toyota Corolla sitting in the parking lot. We're all sitting there like waving our hands. And then I heard it again on the way home. You know what I mean? And so it was funny because I never really cared for that song that much, and we put it on the EP as like sort of like, well, let's just get rid of this one and move on to a better, you know, a better tune for the full length. And but we got a little bit of traction off that, so it was a pretty big moment.
We walked in late, I'm sorry.
No worries.
You may have already spoken to this, but there seems to be a huge debate now in the industry about likes on Facebook.
Okay.
And the importance of, or not, of that.
Yeah.
So would you speak to that?
Well, I mean, I think the more of them you have, where are we going? You know, I think it's important on some level. I mean, I have like sort of a, you know, something that speaks to that right now, which is like the Jack's Mannequin Facebook, which is, you know, I basically, you know, Jack's Mannequin was me. I was a person known as Jack's Mannequin. Like I was the only person on that deal, and you know, we tried desperately and have been trying to get them to just give me my Facebook page because it is me, right? They're like, well, no, it's not Jack's Mannequin, you know, so we're in the process of having to switch over and create an Andrew McMahon Facebook page, which, you know, going from having 400,000 likes on your Facebook page to 0, you know, is something for me that I'm a little like, oh, well, that kind of sucks, you know? I think if you look at, if your goal is to get a major label deal, and I mean, that's really what you're aiming for, the likes are important. I know just from, you know, talking to people inside, there are certain companies that are doing A&R without even listening these days. That they're sitting in rooms and they're effectively boiling down the data for the week, which songs have gone viral, and which is, you know, who's getting the most rapid, you know, impressions and likes, etc. So I think if your goal is mainstream and you want to sign and have a pop record, I think it's probably important. You know, but whether or not it makes a big difference, I guess time will probably tell.
Yeah, our company does a lot of the data analysis and things like that, and we have the biggest Facebook app out there for artists. But likes they are great, but the A&R guy or somebody will also look and see if there's any comments. I mean, if you have, you know, 100,000 likes and nobody's commenting on anything you're doing, you kind of figure out that they're not really fans. We all remember MySpace, the MySpace friends. They didn't really mean much. I think there'll be a time where Facebook likes probably don't mean much.
Well, I think, you know, the more it reaches, I think, critical mass to it. I think all those things kind of burn themselves out because, you know, people stop focusing on them and move on to whatever the next hippest thing is. But I certainly, for my business, like I'm going to work hard to get my likes up as high as I can.
I have a follow-up on that. One of my big pet peeves is when a band says like on a page and they come check out our music, and I go to their page and I'm required to like before I listen to the music.
I'm going to do this to my fans.
Automatic. Yeah, I don't know if I like it until I hear the music. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's funny you should say, because we had a situation where I put up a track, I guess maybe 4 or 5 months ago. It was sort of the last Jack's Mannequin track, and the marketing person that I brought on, who's worked with me for a number of years, but now independently we're working together, and she said, you know, well, we should do this like, you know, as a like campaign, and I was like, I just feel so shitty about that, because how can they, you know what I mean, for the same exact reason that you're talking about. You know, so, no, I get it. I mean, I'm opposed to most of that stuff. I think there are things that, you know, that do come with the territory, unfortunately. If you can find a way to make that, like, you know, attached to something other than actually having to say, I like a song before I hear it, yeah, it's probably a good idea.
I guess I could listen and then unlike if I didn't like it. It's still just
no.
on the principle.
Yeah, no, I get it. That makes sense.
After you know, finishing with something corporate and moving on to Jack's Mannequin, and now with your new release, could you talk to us a little bit about how your style and your songwriting has kind of grown and changed throughout your career?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the fundamentals of it are always sort of similar. That the feeling of a good song feels the same. You know, the moment of sort of like the spark, and then when it ignites, and then when it finishes, you know, all of those components always feel the same. I think there are different roads to the same end point. I'd say the most dramatic transition that I've made has probably been in recent years, as I've become a lot more open to the idea of writing in the studio. And truthfully, a lot of that comes from having written songs for so long. I mean, I started writing songs when I was 9 years old, and I know that sounds crazy, but it's like it's really all I've ever done my whole life. And I've reached a point in recent years where just sitting at the piano and writing a song like I always have, frankly, doesn't always turn me on the same way. It can, but certainly in the past couple of years, I've really enjoyed the process of getting in a studio, you know, either with another writer or producer or track writer or whatever, and sort of harnessing that stream of consciousness. I think the best songs come from a stream of consciousness. A lot of writers I talk to have the same experience. Whether they finish that way, it's not always the case, but the initial ground, laying the foundation for a song, if you can unlock your conscious and let out what's in there, you do best. So for me recently, the way that I've been getting to that point is like putting up a beat, putting down a piano part, and then just top lining over it and singing until words come and putting a melody in and trying to do it as fast as possible. And that's a bit of a departure from, say, some of the corporate records where I would do that same thing, but I would do it at the piano and I wasn't so self-critical, where I would just spit shit out and whatever, it's fine. And a lot of times that was great. Whereas I think as I've gotten older, I'll find myself going like, well, what does that mean? And I'll sort of like, I'll get hung up about it. And so getting into the studio with somebody else who can kind of kick me in the butt and just keep going, and that I found to be really helpful in recent years.
Awesome, thank you so much.
No problem.
I'm curious, when you first started out, or when you started your solo career, did you contact the college?
Hello.
Did you contact the college radio stations and the independent radio stations? Did you find them responsive enough to play your music?
Truthfully, no. I mean, when I first started out, I mean, and again, it was a very different time too when we started. So, but when something corporate started, for instance, our initial thing was just live. I mean, we didn't even have a record. Like the first 2 years that something corporate played, it was just getting people to the shows. That was our whole goal. I was such a fan of live music. Like I said, I grew up waiting in the front line of shows, and so all that stuff kind of followed. And truthfully, most of our radio contact that ever really came to be came from interactions with label personnel reaching out. And then, of course, the K-Rock thing that I mentioned earlier. But even in the broad spectrum, not to say college radio doesn't matter, because it does matter. But I think for me as a starting out point, the most important thing was to get a base of people where I lived who were committed, because they end up spreading the word from there. And radio is so disparate and so tricky that to try and get enough radio to actually add up to something takes so much force that that other than local, I would say focus on building a fan base.
What's been your favorite album that you've put out?
Oh, well, I mean, it's funny because a lot of these things, like you fast forward a couple of years and you go, oh no, wait, that's the one. I think for me, just for the place and time in my life and the creative process and the freedom and the flow of it all, everything in Transit was probably my favorite. It was just kind of a really special moment. It was a very strange period of time in my life, but I was really able to capture the song and deliver the song in a way that made the studio experience so much fun. And there wasn't. My life around the time was probably a little tortured on some level, but the creative process was so easy and free flowing that I've sort of propped that one up in my brain. You can talk to my therapist about it. But yeah, I like that one a lot.
I have a question for Luke. Is that okay?
Sure.
First of all, I posted on Facebook how musicians everywhere owe you a debt of gratitude for what you've done for the industry.
True.
Did you tell me about your question at you now, or?
No, I was just doing that. I was pushing that over. But my question to you is, tell us a little bit about the evolution of Reverb Nation. What's next for you? What we as musicians and managers can look forward to?
What's next? Well, we're always putting out new products. We have a new one out. We released it to like 10,000 of the bands to see what they think of it, and so far it's been really well. Where it's called Crowd Reviews. I don't know if anyone's gotten the email, but it's basically we send out a song. You pay like $20. I don't even know what the dollar amount is. I don't know everything about it. But and a bunch of fans basically tear it apart. They don't know the name of the band, they don't know the name of the song, and they rank it in all these different areas. Because I think fans are the A&R guys. They're the new A&R guys. They're the new curators, I guess. So I think it gives you good feedback. So that's one item. Doing something with YouTube. We have 1.2 billion plays a month. So a lot of times artists can't get a lot of the advertising that they want on their own because they're not big enough. But in aggregate, Reverb Nation is gigantic. We're the second largest video company in the world. And so we can cut deals for you guys that way. So there's a lot of things like that. I don't know what else. Our licensing program is doing incredible. Our live opportunities do really well. We're starting to get, that's kind of like my division. There's like 6 of us go out there trying to get magazines to give you features and, you know, Walk Tour. We do Battle of the Bands with Ernie Ball. So I'm one of the 4 guys who picks the bands for that. All sorts of things.
Thank you.
I do. Anything for Andrew?
Songwriting, a lot of times people write about some dark material from a very, very personal place. I think you found an awesome way to convey that to your fans. There's one song in particular, and a line in that song that always resonates with me. I wanted you to elaborate what you meant when you wrote it, and it's Bankrupt of Blue Sky.
Say what?
Bankrupt of Blue Sky. Suicide.
Oh, Suicide Blonde. Wow. Yeah, for me, when I was writing that song, it was kind of a tricky moment. You know, that's kind of what I was speaking to earlier. It was sort of this halo year after I had, you know, had sort of recovered from being sick. And I was having, I mean, I truthfully was having a hard time writing at that point. I was having a hard time doing much of anything. I was very just blocked up, period. And so it was sort of an escapist thing. You know, it was this idea of like, you know, like, let's just like, you know, go hide out by the beach and smoke and fucking party. Like, you know what I mean? I really like, and this idea of bankrupting the blue sky, yeah, it was just like, let's take as much of that away from the sky as we can and sort of make things better, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, that's where that one came from.
In your opinion, elaborating on the darkness of the music you write, what song do you think had the deepest meaning to you? I mean, besides, I feel like "Me and the Moon" is a pretty dark song, but what relation does that have to your life?
Well, I'm gonna get my therapist up here for this one. No, so "Me and the Moon" was again one of these more of these stream of consciousness kind of deals. I wrote the first lyric sort of immediately. You know, in this, I was living with Jordan from Newfound Glory. You know, he and I we were buds, and we had toured a bunch in the early years. And he got this house out in Marietta, and I was like, can I move in? Like, I can still live with my parents, you know. And so he let me move into his house, and you know, he toured a lot, and so I kind of like sat in this desert house, you know, alone for a pretty good amount of this one year. And that first line, which was so tragic, which I never thought I could sell. When you think about the first Sunny Corporate record, it's very sunny, you know, and very, you know, it was my high school years, you know, and this line comes out, it's a good year for murder, you know, and so, and originally, you know, where it relates to my life, I don't know, I think I know a lot of strong women, you know, who put up with a lot of shit, and I think, you know, it's a pretty common theme in a lot of people's lives, this idea of the mother who gives it all, and maybe the father that doesn't give as much, and I sort of wanted to explore that. And originally it was like this courtroom drama, like the chorus for that song was originally this whole deal about, you know, like after she kills this dude, what happens, and it was a bad chorus, and I finished the chorus in Amsterdam. So I'll let you do the math on that one. But that's where "It's Me and the Moon" came from.
Okay.
I spent a night in Amsterdam chasing the moon. Literally, I tried to get to the moon.
Because "Passenger" has a lot of dark songs that have meaning to you, but I didn't see how that song was related.
Yeah, I mean, again,
Would you say
I
that-
can't tell you everything.
Would you say that's the darkest song you've written, or?
Me and the Moon? Yeah, I mean, I guess on some level, probably. It's the only one I've written about killing somebody, so yeah, I suppose.
What are you listening to right now?
Right now, gosh, New Phoenix that just dropped. I'm looking forward to it. I don't think the album's out yet, but the single, I've been checking that out. Let's see what else, the Passion Pit from last year was big for me. I still am jamming the latest Mike Snow quite a bit and digging that. Sort of dug back into my old Dawes North Hills record recently, been loving that. I've been on the road for like 6 weeks and I started going to this abyss where like it just ends up being like writing a set list, going to sound check, and getting the show done. So certainly after, if you want to parlay some new information to me, what I should be checking out, I would be down to listen.
If you had to pick one last song to listen to before you go to the mosh pit of heaven, what would it be?
Wow. I don't know why. I don't know why this is coming to mind, but it's for some reason my name is Jonas by Weezer is coming to mind.
With your upcoming tours and stuff, are you planning more intimate shows or like bigger places like House of Blues?
It's sort of a hodgepodge. I mean, the summer is going to be all big shows. We're opening up for OAR for the summer, but we are coming back. We're doing a Freebird live gig on one of our off days in Jacksonville. So that's about as intimate as it gets. And people are kind of like sweating on top of you when you play the Freebird. Yeah, I mean, truthfully, this tour has been such a revelation. We booked small rooms, frankly, because we were not certain if they'd sell. You don't know when you go out. Like, I've been in 2 bands that have been successful. And had these monikers that I've traveled under. So we were a little nervous in the fact that so many of them sold. Obviously there is the inclination to play some bigger venues as well, but the connection on this tour, playing a lot of these songs from deeper in the catalog all the way up to brand new stuff, and getting to do it in such a close contact kind of way, certainly leaves me, wanting to at least buoy the bigger shows with some smaller shows as well, for sure.
Do you have any songs that you don't like to play live, or you just don't enjoy singing them in front of the crowd, or?
I don't know. I don't think I have it. I mean, there's stuff like people will ask me to play from like records that I put out when I was like 15 or 16 years old. Like the diehards like play this one, and that stuff I don't tend to care to revisit very much. But yeah, I mean, generally speaking, if it ended up on a record and I wrote it, I put it there because I was connected to it. The process of putting something out for me mostly is the curating process. If it ended up on an album, chances are I like it and would be totally down to play it. Whether I've learned it and know how to play it, or relearned it and know how to play it is another question sometimes. Yeah.
Let's go all the way. I was going to say, do you prefer touring in the U.S. or do you like touring like going overseas, Europe, maybe Japan, anything like that?
I mean, Japan and Australia, the U.S. is the easiest, obviously, to tour, as far as just getting places and having a number of cities concentrated, where you can get to. Australia is one of my favorite places in the universe, you know what I mean? Just being in Australia is such an incredible vibe, I think, most clearly there for whatever reason, and I love playing shows there. I love playing shows in Japan. Europe, I'm going back to for the first time in a couple of years at the end of May. Europe it can be tricky as a place to tour, just as far as like just how you travel, and there's so many different countries in it, and you are pretty disconnected. So sometimes it's harder out there. But for me, it's not. It's less about sort of the big picture when it comes to shows, as much as it's about the night and the stage, and that can happen. That magic happens anywhere. You know what I mean? It's like you can have a night where you're playing to 5,000 people and feel nothing, and you can have a night where you're in a bar in Munich and there's 50 people and it's the best thing that ever happened to you. And so for me, I think it's more about focusing on the individual show and getting that connection going between you and the audience.
I just want to ask both of you guys, what are your thoughts on crowdfunding and its place with the platforms that be currently and in your businesses?
You want the first?
I'm not an artist. To me, it just seems weird to ask your fans, but most artists are fine with it, and most fans seem to be fine with it. I know a lot of bands who are doing incredible things with Pledge Music and Kickstarter. I know the Pledge Music guys there, they're die-hard music fans. I guess if you have a fan base, you can do something like that. If you don't really have a fan base, I don't know if you're going to get very far with it. I see a lot of the established artists doing it, and I guess that's a great way to self-fund it, basically.
Right. Yeah. I've had I'm sort of undecided on this, to be honest. I do share your opinion in a lot of respects. I think there's a fine line, because fans will give, and they will give. And then, you guys have been at a couple of shows on this tour alone, and so there is this sort of moment, like now that I'm independent, there is a thought to this that I have where it's like, well, if I really want to make the record I want to make, and get in with a producer that I think can really take what I do to the next level. That's costs a lot of dough, and then you get into this conversation, well, do you then go make a deal? And when you make a deal nowadays in the business, you're giving everything up. You lose everything. I mean, they're going to take a piece of your touring, a piece of your merchandise, and historically, that's been the only way I've eaten. Record deals have never paid me anything. I've never received a record royalty check in my life. And I've sold over 1 million records, so that you get to this point where you think, well, maybe if instead I'm beholden to the fans and they pay, and I make a record for them, and there's no strings attached, and I can do the art the way I want to do it. The flip side is, how does that play out in your fan base? You know what I mean? If some kid gives you $500 to make this record and they don't like it, then all of a sudden it's like you have this weird relationship with your fan all of a sudden. And so I've been a little tormented by this myself because I'm trying to figure out what I do next. For the most part, I feel like if you're an artist and you have the money, you should put your money where your mouth is. And I think if I were to do this sort of crowdfunded thing, I would say, any amount that got raised, I match. You know what I mean? Or something, just to say, like, if you're not willing to dig into your own bank account to make your record, but you're letting your fans do it for you, and you actually have the money, I think that's a little shady.
Anyone else?
What was the biggest struggle you had with the label, or just like stage personnel or band members?
I think the hardest time I ever had on a label was during the second Jack's Mannequin record, The Glass Passenger. I basically paid for the entire record myself up to that point. It was one of these scenarios where they really wanted me to work with some producer that they thought would be the right producer, and I really wanted to go back to the producer that I'd worked with for the first Jack's Mannequin record. It just seemed to make sense that he wasn't part of Jack's Mannequin and I wanted to use him. I took tons of meetings. None of them materialized. Some guys I liked, some guys didn't like me. But I had these songs and I was like, I can't waste these songs. Any of you who are songwriters, you know that the energy you put into a song, you can lose that pretty quickly if you don't pin it down. So I sort of said screw it, and I went into the studio anyway, and I just started shelling out dough, and I got about $100,000 into the record, and finally was like, okay guys, like it's time to pay me back. Like I'm like it's Christmas and I need to I got bills to pay, and they basically were they didn't at first. And so I shut down production and left with my middle finger in the air and drove across the country and said, call me when you guys are ready to, pay me back, and they did. But it was a challenge, that record was a challenge because I made the first record with a small label, not expecting to ever be on a big label again, and the small label sold their interest back to the big company, and I still love a lot of the people that were there, but you get this bureaucracy going, and everybody wants, they want you to do things a certain way, and I've just never been that guy, and it's to my own detriment a lot of times, truthfully, but you have to believe in what you create, and yeah, they certainly, they stuck it to me for a little while.
somebody you want to work with, dead or alive, like of all time, produce like the best song you've ever written?
Danger Mouse.
All right.
Yeah, truthfully. I think that dude has like a way of creating like a minimalist production around any artist that he works with, and then it makes their voice sound so perfect and so in the track that it's definitely long since been a dream to get in the studio with him. Also, like Greg Kirsten's another dude that I would really love to work with.
Anyone else? Last chance.
I'm actually wondering, what was that goofy song you were referring to from the first question that you said was on the radio and all that? Which song
It was a Fusey Jordan.
I love that song.
You might hear it tonight. Yeah, Florida was really on that one for me, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
That's it?
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks everyone.